Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for the AIC 2013 webinar series. In the coming months, this series is going to explore topics in innovation, collaboration, and commercialisation. This is the first of 4 webinars this calendar year, and we're very pleased to welcome you here. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Queensland Government, Department of Science, IT, Innovation and the Arts for supporting these events and bringing this information to everybody. So, first of all, I'd just like to tell you a bit about the AIC, the Australian Institute for Commercialisation. Generally, companies come to us. We're a consulting organisation, and companies generally come to us for one of 3 reasons. For innovation, so that could be new products and new markets, collaboration and that could be with other businesses and research organisations, and commercialisation, so assistance in commercialising new opportunities. We've been around for 10 years helping Australian innovators achieve commercial success, and market research, the topic of today's webinar, is very fundamental to what we do, either as a standalone service or as a built-in part of our consulting services. We do a lot of market research, and we find that it gives us the information we need to really help our clients. So for those of you who are new to the GoToWebinar program, welcome. And if you'd just like to look, you've got the viewing pane through which I'm sharing my screen with you at the moment. And also there's the control panel, so that's off to the right of your screen. It should be. There's a little red icon you can press there to bring that out. If you'd just like to open that, you'll see a small hand icon, that allows you to raise your hand. So I'll be asking you to do that throughout the webinar. So if you'd like to do that now, if everyone would like to raise their hand, I'll just check that we're all doing that correctly. Okay, fantastic. And great turnout today, guys. We've got about 30 people on the line. Fantastic. All right, I'll just lower your hands for you. Now, for a little bit about myself, my name is Sean Smith. I've been with the AIC for about 3 years, and I manage our market research service here. And throughout that time, I've been lucky enough to work with some fantastically innovative companies across a number of industries. And I'm going to share with you today some of what I've learnt over that time. Prior to the AIC, I was actually working in medical research. So I worked for Professor Ian Fraser, the inventor of the Gardasil vaccine, the world's first vaccine against cervical cancer. And I'll comment later on some of the differences between full-blown scientific research and market research, what we're talking about today. And just one other point. If you'd like to ask questions during the webinar, I'll do my best to answer those questions as we go, but I'll also be allowing some time at the end of the webinar to answer questions. Now, I could have also called today's webinar Surviving the Information Explosion. The growth in online information is fundamentally changing the business environment. Things have changed remarkably in the past 10 to 20 years. And the image I've got there on the screen is a cool way of demonstrating the sheer volume of information that we've got available to us now. I'm sure you all remember the Encyclopedia Britannica. There was about 32 volumes in total. This is an image of what Wikipedia might look like if it were hardbound and put into 10 bookshelves. So that's about 1,900 volumes total. Now this trend is happening across business at the moment. The amount of information presents a huge opportunity for us, but also it's an issue in the sense that it's easy to waste time trawling through all of this information. You need to make sure when doing market research that you set your research questions and objectives early on to help prevent you wasting time to doing this. But also the opportunities are immense, and the way that you can use this information inside your business opens a world of possibilities, which I'm about to talk about. So another thing I'd like to mention also is the Open Data Initiative. Now, this is happening worldwide, and Queensland Government is also leading the way here. Open data is about making public information, so government-funded work, information resulting from that, publicly available. And there's a lot of information coming out now which is of use to business through the Queensland Government. And that publicly funded is an important point, because it's going to be a recurring theme you'll see throughout this webinar, that generally private companies can be as private as they like and will not publish that much information, whereas work funded by the government or public companies is generally far more, there's generally far more information generated and available as a result of that. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, the way that I'd like to start is by walking you through some practical examples where I've seen market research really used to make a difference to the bottom line in business in the past. I'll start with feasibility, and that's about using market research to investigate the feasibility of your idea or new venture. Sales and marketing. So how can you use market research information to inform your sales and marketing strategies? Thirdly, negotiations. So how can market research help to inform you when negotiating with another business? And I'm sure you'd agree in this situation that knowledge is power. Entering new and unfamiliar markets with increased confidence is another thing that market research can help you to do. And also to identify business partners and competitors. And once I've talked through some of these examples, I'll talk about how you can go about doing your own market research, and also what some of the common mistakes and pitfalls are, so where people tend to go wrong. Now, there are a large number of questions you can ask about market research. You can ask using market research, I should say. To illustrate this, I'd like to use a silly example of a fisherman fishing in a pond. The fisherman might want to know, for example, how many fish are in the pond. So how big is the target market? And if there are not enough fish in his pond, he might want to go to another pond, for example. Secondly, will the fish like the bait? Or how does the market feel about your product? What are the preferences of the customer? And also, who are the other fishermen? So who are your competitors? Is this pond being fished out? All questions that you could ask through market research. And I'll discuss later the fact that it is important to define these questions at the beginning. So I'd just again like to call on a show of hands. Who out there is using market research regularly as a part of what they do, as a part of their day-to-day business activities? All right, so we've got a lot of people raising their hands. Excellent. It's good to see. Good to see quite a few people out there using market research, but also quite a few of you who aren't. Okay. Now, just a few definitions before we get into the interesting stuff. Firstly, it's important to distinguish between primary and secondary market research. So secondary market research is also known as desktop research, and that involves reviewing and analysing existing research and information. So going back to our fisherman example, you might look in the local fishing guide, for example, for an expert's opinion. Primary market research, on the other hand, is collecting data that does not yet already exist, that is research to collect. So this involves doing original research yourself. This is often more time-consuming and expensive. So in our fishing scenario, you could be asking the bloke next to you what's biting, or you could be maybe testing the water with a few different kinds of bait to see what's working. Now, another definition, quantitative data, that deals with numbers, things that can be measured, and qualitative data, on the other hand, deals with descriptions, preferences, perceptions, things that can't easily be expressed by numbers. So qualitative could be something like what customers think about your product, for example. Now, finally, B2B. whether you're selling a product to a business or a consumer, that's going to affect the kind of market research that you'd like to do. For example, if you are selling, by consumer I mean, people at large, community at large, or selling to another business, it's going to make a big difference. And I've just seen a question come out. Will you be emailing out notes? Yes, after this this webinar, we'll definitely be emailing out notes. So on to my first example, and this is about the Cairns Aquarium project. This is a nice segue from my silly fish example. This is based on some work that we did recently, and in fact there's a case study online. I'm just going to post the note so that all of you have that available to you. There's a link there. You can all go and check that out in your own time. But basically, for entrepreneurs, market research can really help you to road test your idea. So, and it'll also help you to avoid wasting money on unprofitable ventures. So you can use the information from market research to convince investors and others that your venture will be profitable and that it's worthwhile backing you. And this goes the same for business managers in established companies, sometimes called intrapreneurs, doing new innovative things from inside an established business. Now the Cairns Aquarium example. If ever there was an example of how market research has helped someone move from idea to multi-million-dollar reality, I think this is it. This is a great project that I was involved in with a guy by the name of Daniel Liebnick. Now, Daniel is already a successful business manager. He's the chief executive of an existing company that does not have a lot to do with aquariums, mind you. And Daniel moved to Cairns and saw an opportunity for a world-class attraction in an aquarium in Cairns. And this is the point where we got involved, because Daniel wanted to ask a few key questions along the lines of, does an opportunity exist for an economically sustainable major tourist attraction in Cairns? And the kind of information that Daniel was looking for in this case was tourism figures for the region, industry trends, market demographics, market size, and so on. Information that would help him to answer that question. So we worked with Daniel, and through market research, focusing mainly on secondary market research and mostly publicly available information, we were able to find a whole raft of information for Daniel. One thing we could find was visitor numbers to the Great Barrier Reef, for example. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, a government organisation, they charge people fees to enter the marine park, and they keep all of that information on the number of visitors, and they provide that freely online. The Reef Cooperative Research Centre, CRC, they've done some research on profiles of the kind of people that visit the Great Barrier Reef, where they're from, how long they spend in Cairns, what else they do while they're there, that kind of thing, how much they spend even. So that's also freely available. The Townsville Aquarium, so another similar attraction, that was the visitor numbers and even the profile of visitors was available online for the Townsville Aquarium. And also Kuranda Scenic Rail. Now that's another tourist attraction in the Cairns area. That's part owned by Queensland Rail. They publish their visitor numbers online. So using all of this information, we were able to create an estimate of the total market size that was available to the venture, and also forecast the likely numbers of visitors there would be to such an attraction. So what does this do? Helps to confirm the feasibility of the idea, helps entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs to avoid wasting money on unprofitable ideas, and also you can communicate your idea to investors, to the government, to whoever you like, and show them that it's a viable idea. So hopefully in this situation I've shown you how it has been useful. And how is it going? How's the Cairns Aquarium going? Well, in fact, its development's well underway. It's going to be a $35 million world-class attraction set to open in 2016 on a 4,000 square metre site in the Cairns CBD. So all of this enabled by market research. Now, the next example I'd like to talk about is sales and marketing. market research can be really handy when you're trying to develop a sales strategy, marketing strategy, and the example that I would like to use here is an Australian installer of solar panels. So they install solar panels on roofs of houses. And they're in New South Wales, and so this is a business-to-consumer market, and the company's looking for locations to target sales efforts and spending for solar rooftop panels. So looking where to put their effort in selling. So we were able to find for them from the New South Wales government some information on the number of, or I should say the proportion of houses in any suburb that have solar panels. So you can see on this image here, this picture here, the cool blue suburbs or regions that have a low uptake of solar, and the red hot solar suburbs. And we were also able to get some information on the growth of solar in these areas. So you can see how that might be useful when you're trying to target your sales. So say for argument's sake, the company chose, for a number of reasons, Dubbo as an example of an area. Looks orange, reasonably promising, a good area perhaps to target your sales and marketing for solar PV. Another great source of information you can use in this situation is Australian Bureau of Statistics. So they have a community profiles feature online, and in this case you can get a huge amount of information about Dubbo, including number of households, the household income, people per household, and so on. And you could even relate that information back to your solar information. So you could find a link, for example, between households with a high income and households that install solar. So again, that would tell you that you need to be targeting high-income suburbs, for example. Just another area where market research has been useful in the past for our clients. Now, the next example I'd like to talk you through is negotiations and financial projections. Now, I'm sure you'll all agree that when it comes to negotiating, knowledge is power. The more that you know, the more likely you are to get an outcome in your favour. So market research can really help you get a better result than you might otherwise get. For example, if you're selling to a business, knowing what other businesses have paid for a similar product would be a great help to you. It would tell you what the market is willing to bear, what price the market's willing to bear, for example. And an example I'd like to use here is a company we've worked with in the past, an Australian manufacturer of hot water systems. Now, this company was planning to export to the United States and to Latin America, and they needed to negotiate distributor agreements with potential distributors overseas. So that is the exclusive right to distribute their product in a number of foreign countries and states. So in this case, we used a database called Euromonitor. Now this provides information that's similar to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but it's international information. It's all compiled, so it's in the one place, and it's all in English, which helps. Using this information, we were able to find out the total housing stock in these countries, the number of houses, the demographic information, household size, and so on. And this information helps the hot water system manufacturer to estimate the market size and therefore how much they would expect a distributor pay for the right to distribute in that market. And another area where market research can really be of assistance is entering new and unfamiliar markets. So if you're an established business, chances are you've got a few markets in which you're comfortable, markets that you know incredibly well. Market research, however, becomes important when you're venturing outside this comfort zone. So if you're going into markets that you do not know particularly well, or this could be through a new product or an expansion, market research can really assist you to reduce the risk here. And if you're an entrepreneur, which hopefully some of you are, you live outside this comfort zone. You're always testing the waters in markets that are unfamiliar for you. So it can be even more useful here. Now, I'd like to continue on with our previous example, our hot water manufacturer. So they decided that before full-blown export into the United States and Latin America, that they wanted to test the market a little bit, and they'd like to do that in one or in a handful of states in the United States to see how the market accepts their product and get some feedback. So this particular hot water system was very efficient when you compare it to electric hot water, but not very efficient when you compare it to natural gas hot water. So what they were looking for was states in America, in the United States, that had a high proportion of electric hot water. And you can see here, we were able to find, again, publicly available information through the US Department of Energy and also the Energy Information Administration. A figure on the left here with the proportion of gas to electricity used as a water heating fuel by households, and then say we were also able to get that resolution by state. So you can see here, this is Florida. This might be a state that such a company might choose, because you can see here that 87% of people in Florida are using electric hot water, whereas only 12.5% are using natural gas. And I'll show you this cool map we're able to get them even of the US natural gas network. So that sort of shows where they might be interested in targeting. So there's another example of how we've helped a company, or market research rather, has helped a company to avoid wasting money entering markets where they're less competitive. Now, I'd just like to move on to the next example. Just had some feedback that there were some sound issues, but they appear to be resolved now. The next example I'd like to talk about is identifying business partners and competitors. So this is an area where I've seen market research really unlock value for our clients. If you can get in front of the right people in the right companies with your product, the opportunities are immense, and we find that market research can really help you to do that. So say for argument's sake, I was interested in the Australian wine industry, which I am. There's a database that we use called IBISWorld. Some of you may be familiar with it. They provide industry reports, and you can see the figure at the bottom of the screen here. IBISWorld give a figure of major players in the Australian wine industry by market share. So this is obviously quite general, broad information, but this gives you an idea of who you might be targeting. For example, if you had a product that you wanted to sell to these companies. So that's useful as a start, but once you've identified the companies that you would like to work with, presumably you want to actually call them, get in touch with these people. So another great source of this information I find is LinkedIn. Can we just have a show of hands? How many of you are currently on LinkedIn? Is it something that you're all using? Because I would say it's something that you should be using. It's a great tool. Okay, good. We've got some good level of people on LinkedIn here. It's a great tool for identifying contacts, sales contacts inside companies that are also inside your network. And it's really an area where I think if you aren't comfortable, you should consider upskilling. There are some great programs out there to help you improve your LinkedIn skills. I would recommend that. Now, LinkedIn is one way. LinkedIn searches is one way of getting involved with people in these companies. Another way is using the company websites. They'll often list their managers on company websites, or alternatively, you can use an online search to identify some industry events, trade events that you might like to attend. Now, I have colleagues that swear by trade events as almost the only source of market research that they do. They will simply go and talk to someone from a stall of a particular company that they're interested in and get an information download that way. And look, one other thing I find quite commonly is if you do call people and you're obviously courteous and you know, you're conscious of the fact that you're taking up their time, and you have to be conscious of what's in it for them. If you simply say, I'm just calling to do some market research, I'd like to ask you a few questions, I find overwhelmingly people want to help you. I've had very positive outcomes from doing that. So another example, another way you might get in touch is through trade magazines. In this case, Wine Spectator. That could be a periodical you might want to look at. So all good ways of helping you get in front of the right person in the right company that you're selling to. So how do you go about market research? Hopefully now I've demonstrated to you that it's worth your while to do some market research, that it could benefit your venture, established company, so on. But I think it's important to have a structured methodology for doing market research, so as not to waste your time. As I said, there's huge amounts of information out there. You really want a return on your investment here. So step one, I would suggest, is to set your objectives. Try and sum up your problem in one sentence, and this is really going to help to clarify things. For example, if I wanted to start, let's say, a dog washing business in Mount Gravatt, I might ask, is there a large enough market to support my dog wash business in Mount Gravatt? And then I would recommend you detail no more than 3 research objectives, otherwise it can get a bit complex. So the questions might be, further, how many people in Mount Gravatt own dogs? How many existing dog wash companies service Mount Gravatt? And how well do the existing companies service the consumers there? So these are some questions you could be asking, some objectives. Step 2, plan the research method. Now, this is how you're going to find your information. It's best to start out with secondary market research. I can't emphasize that enough for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's cheaper to do. And also, you'll find that that kind of information can help you to further define your research problems and objectives and make your primary research more effective when you do it. Secondly, I would say always take into account the validity of the secondary research that you're looking at. So I mentioned earlier I come from an academic research background. In that case, papers are peer-reviewed. There's a lot of rigor that goes into something before it's published, whereas online, anyone can publish just about anything. So really, you need to be your own peer reviewer here. You need to validate, check the sources of information, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's trustworthy, more importantly. And once you've planned your research method, so once you've set out that plan of how you might find your information, it's up to you to go ahead and do the research. So through the examples I mentioned earlier, there are some great tools, obviously online search tools, Google, I'm sure we're all familiar with, LinkedIn and other social media. There are third-party providers of information, so there's the publicly available information, such as Australian Bureau of Statistics and so on, I mentioned earlier. And then you've got your commercial databases and reports. Now that includes IBIS World, I mentioned earlier. There are some others, Digital Business Insights, Euromonitor. There's a whole raft of them. And for high-tech industries, we will use patent search databases, but that depends on the industry. And then there's obviously third-party providers of market research, so people like ourselves who do it under contract. And then obviously primary research is another element, so you can do your own telephone call surveys, face-to-face, focus groups, as you like. And finally, once you've done the research, gone ahead with that, so let's say for our dog wash business example, you Googled other dog wash companies in Mount Gravatt, you examined the websites and noted their service offerings, you've found data on the number of dog owners registered there and so on. Then you need to process this information. And here we're venturing into the area of marketing strategy, business strategy. So it's about interpreting what you've found through your market research in a way that that can add value to your business. Now, there are a number of frameworks for doing this, and it's really going to depend on your personal business and your own situation. One quite simple framework I can mention here is the SWOT framework, and that's, I guess, a structured planning method to evaluate the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you can do this for a product, for a place, for an industry, or a person, as you like. And you can feed information into this framework and others to look at your advantages over other people, your disadvantages relative to your competitors, elements that you could exploit, so your opportunities, and then elements in the environment that could be a trouble for your business, so the threats. And now I'd like to mention some of the mistakes that people commonly make, or that I've seen, and I've been guilty of some of these myself. Now, I did say before, always start with secondary market research, but I would recommend doing a combination of both secondary and primary market research. Because, for example, you can find out more sometimes in a 5-minute phone call with a market expert than you might find out in 2 days of research on your own. I mean, it's always worth picking up the phone and talking to people. Similarly, if you start with primary research, you can be quite an expensive way of doing things, and you could be looking for information, or you could be researching something that has already been researched, that's already publicly available. So you don't want to waste your money. As I've reiterated a few times, take the time to define the key questions and how you plan to use the information. I'm not saying you shouldn't change your objectives, but try and have a clear objective when you start out. Thirdly, I find, especially for commercial market research databases where you buy reports, people often have unrealistic expectations of the amount of information available. So you can spend a huge amount of money on market research reports if you want to. A typical report costs upwards of $5,000, and depending on the provider, there's a variety of costs and a variety of providers out there. And often with that amount of money, what you'll get is quite a broad overview of the market. It might not address your particular issues or problems, so be conscious of that. And also, you'll find some vendors will offer sections of reports. You can buy a small section of it. You do not get a lot for your money in this case. It's really quite an expensive way to go. So have a look at what's out there before you buy commercial market research reports. Fourth, definitely question the reliability of the information you're accessing. Even reports that you buy that cost a lot of money can be questionable in terms of the information that they provide you. And finally, I would recommend that you look out for assistance online. Obviously, you've all done that already in attending this webinar, but there are some great guides out there that are to help you to do your market research. Now, I'm going to paste in the chat pane here a link. This is to the Queensland Government Market Research Guide. That's a free guide. You can all have a look at that, and that will guide you through some of the steps that I mentioned. Secondly, if you are an inventor or an entrepreneur, at the AIC here we have an inventors service. So you just need to go onto our website, which is www.aussiecom.com, and you can sign up for the inventors service online, which will have some further information on market research, but on all kinds of topics that are of use to inventors and entrepreneurs. So next, I'd like to go through some of the resources. So I've mentioned a few of these already, but there are a vast number of resources online. Google Advanced Search is your friend. I use that a lot, and become familiar with the advanced search features, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. Queensland Government guides are very good too. I use Google Scholar when I'm looking for academic articles, so that's any of the academic research literature. The Australian Bureau of Statistics, that has census data and statistics. IBIS World Australia, another, I would recommend that, a good database of industry reports. SurveyMonkey is a cool little tool you can use to design electronic surveys. I find that to be quite useful. And Google Patent, if you are looking through the technical patent literature. So there are a few of the resources. There's a huge number of other resources out there, but they're some of the ones that I use quite frequently. And look, when you are doing your online searches with Google, there's a few little tricks you can use to help you to get more relevant information. One that I find particularly useful is searching for a particular file type. So if you're looking for reports rather than websites, you can set the file type to PDF. You simply need to type file type :PDF in your search bar at the end of your search keywords. And that will filter out a lot of the websites and search only for reports, PDF files basically. And also I find that when you are using online searches like Google, follow the thread, pay attention to the keywords that pop up as you're searching, and use those new keywords to continue searching. So just be aware of that. Obviously, persistence and perseverance are important. I can think of some information that I've provided to clients that's taken me, 2 or 3 days sometimes of searching, frustration to find. But when you do find it, it's incredibly useful. So be persistent. Also, obviously, there's you can use quotations to define search strings rather than individual words. And as I've said before, and I'll reiterate, you need to look for the date and validity of the publication. So that should give you a very preliminary introduction to market research. What the kind of things you can use it for are, what some of the resources you can use are, and how to go about it. Thanks very much for attending this webinar. And look, I'd like to, before I take a few questions, I'd like to just put in a shameless plug for our second webinar, which is about the business model canvas. So this is a tool. The questions that this webinar will ask are you doing business the same way you did 5 years ago? Are you wanting to create more value in your business and not sure how to go about it? And the business model canvas is a simple visual representation. You can see the figure here for your business model, including your interactions with customers, suppliers, key partners. And using a number of simple techniques, the canvas can be used to generate new ideas and explore different ways of doing things. So that's going to be presented by Robert Geddes, our designer in residence here at the AIC. And I'll just paste a link now to our events page if you're interested in that. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And we've got plenty of time now for questions. If any of you would like to ask me anything at all about market research and your particular situation. If you would like to ask a question, you simply just need to open your control panel, and there's a bar in there. You can type in to ask a question, and I'll just answer it. And also, if anyone has got any stories that they would like to share about how market research has helped them with their business, please raise your hand, and I can unmute you if you'd like to share those stories. So I've got a great question here from Debbie Black. In a medical device industry where every human can be so different, how do I define my market? And it helps people to breathe better, the invention. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and that's a good question, because when you're looking at business to consumer markets, often, obviously, you're not going to be targeting all consumers. You're going to be looking for a specific subset. So that's about defining your target market. Now, I don't know a lot about your particular medical device, but you can look at the kinds of conditions that people have that would make them likely to use your medical device, and that might help you to define your target market there. We have done some work for medical device companies in the past, and we've found also that clinical trials, looking at clinical trials, can be an interesting way of seeing where markets are for your particular medical product. So clinical trials are a way of tests for new medical devices, and there's some information on the US National Institute of Health website that will tell you exactly where you can search, exactly where in the world relevant clinical trials are taking place for you. Next question. I'm just going to have a look at a few of the other questions here. How do you find information about schools and contact details? This is from Turney. I have the Education Queensland database, but it's tricky to find schools for other states other than mine. And it can be the case sometimes that when you're looking for specific information like that, you might have to go down to the level of individual websites. It can be very time consuming, but I've often had to do that. You might find a database, for example, listing all the schools, but you'd have to go to each individual school's website to get the data that you need. I'm just looking through a few more of these questions. There's a huge number of questions here. I'll try and address them all. So I've got a question here from Esther. What research resources are best in marketing a service to other businesses? The ABS data I have looked at seems to be more suited to marketing research to individuals. That's a great question. So I find that, as I mentioned earlier, some of the commercial databases, such as IBIS World Australia, but there are other ones out there, and it will depend whether or not you're looking at Australian businesses or international businesses. Some of those sources of information will give you details on market share breakdown in a particular market, so who the major players are, who the biggest businesses are, and who you might want to target there. As I said, also, it's quite difficult when you're trying to find information about private businesses, as they can be as private as they like. So be aware of the difference there. If you're looking for publicly traded companies, you're going to get more information than if you're looking for a private business. Okay, I'm just going to have a look through a few more of these questions. I've got a comment here from Sandy. Feeling overwhelmed by the info flows. Yep, I can definitely relate to that and understand what's going on. So much to read. It's very limiting. Any thoughts on how to narrow down what to follow through? Because I'm being stopped by the volume of choice. Yeah, that's a great one. And look, it's going to depend on your particular area of interest. One thing I've found particularly useful is a service called Google Alerts. Now, you just need to type that into your search browser, and what you can actually set is an alert, a push notification. So it'll send you an email when a new website or an update to an existing website happens for your topic of interest. So using push notifications like that, emails and so on, can be a great way of keeping up to date in your area of interest. Similarly, I follow quite a few blogs, subscribe to a number of blogs and Twitter feeds. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Twitter, but that can be another way to stay up to date. It's really also as much about what you don't read as what you do read. So I would recommend, if you do have sources of information or people you're following or so on that are consistently turning up irrelevant results, I would say stop following them, stop them from sending you emails or so on. You've got to be quite selective. A question from Brett Sterling. He wants to find out how many filing cabinets there are in the world country or state? That's a great question, Brett. I'm not personally quite familiar with the filing cabinet market. And look, this is a good example of in some situations you'll find that you have to broaden your scope a little bit. So you might not be able to find how many filing cabinets there are. I haven't had a look. I can't try that. But what you could do in that situation is look at a broader product category. So, for example, there might be some excellent information out there about office furniture sales globally in general, or companies that manufacture filing cabinets and other types of. I mean, there's if you start to broaden your scope, you can find all kinds of information that, although is not exactly what you're looking for, can still be very useful to you. I'm just going to look through a few more questions here. Just bear with me one moment. So I've got a question about from Anne. Boutique winery owner. That's fantastic. I always like clients who own wineries. Wanting to look at setting up an online store or marketing outlet that will attract a certain clientele and then try and expand it into our supply area. How would I gather information around who and how to approach the demographic that may want this service? And I think in that situation, I mean, the question you're asking there is I think beyond simply market research. It's more around general marketing and business strategy. But I think in this situation, one quite useful thing to do can be to look at other businesses that are servicing a similar market to the market that you're looking at, and what they're doing to approach the demographic and what kind of online sales channels they're using. Although you may not be able to find the information for your individual situation, you might be able to find some great information on what's worked well before and what's worked well overseas. And I would be looking for something like that. Okay. Thank you for all of these excellent questions. Absolutely fantastic questions. Got another question here on wanting to speak directly with the minister. Okay, I think you've got to, if you are contacting companies, you want to make sure you're contacting the right level, and this goes for government too. Depending on who you're talking to, you want to be targeting it at the right level. Sometimes, if you aim too high, if you're trying to contact, for example, the chief executive of a large multinational corporation, you're going to have a really hard time of getting through, and people at that level will have gatekeepers. They're going to have secretaries and so on that will basically filter out your market research question. But if you say, for example, you have a new product and you're approaching people in the research and development department of a particular company, you might be more likely to have a positive outcome there, and you could be looking at the right level inside the company there. So I'd recommend being quite conscious of what level you're trying to contact if you are directly contacting these companies for the sake of market research. And also, as I said, be conscious of taking people's time and think about what's in it for them. Present it to people as an opportunity as well. Can help sometimes. So look, I think that's all we've really got in terms of questions. If anyone has anything else, I've left my contact details up on the screen there. I'd like to thank you all for coming along, and we will be sending around some notes shortly, just summarising what we learnt today. And look, feel free to contact me if you've got any questions or doubts about what I've said. So thanks again, and look, we hope to see you at our next webinar, Rethink Your Business, Introduction to the Business Model Canvas. Thanks again.